On behalf of the Archives and History Committee of the First Baptist Church of LaGrange, we'd like to welcome Danny Daniels, who served in our military during the Vietnam War, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about his experiences. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you, Julian.
And Danny's the only one I've done that's been a member of this church since he was a small child.
That's correct.
So he's as familiar with this church as any living member, I'm sure. Danny, before we get into your military experience, you might give us a little rundown about growing up here, anything you'd like to say in that regard.
I grew up here in LaGrange. As we were talking about earlier, I was born over in Zebulon, Georgia, while my father was in World War II. And after he got out of the Army, we came back here to LaGrange as a child, and I went to kindergarten here. Matter of fact, I went to Ms. Green's kindergarten next door here at the Presbyterian Church, and we were members of First Baptist since Dad had been a member here. He was from LaGrange, and I've been a member since I was a child, kindergarten age, and I think at around 10 years old, I accepted Christ as my Savior and joined the church. And except for a stint in the military, where I served for 4 years, I've been a member of this church practically all my life.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about your schooling after you left LaGrange and how it led to you getting into the Army?
Yes. I went to LaGrange High School, graduated from there in 1961, and went to North Georgia Military School. I decided that after looking around at several schools that I would go to North Georgia College. I had some friends who had been there, and I attended North Georgia College for 2 years. And while I was there, of course, at that time it was mandatory for all males to be involved in the ROTC program, which I was involved in. And as a result of the ROTC program at North Georgia, which is a really fine military school, I transferred to the University of Georgia in 1963 and continued ROTC at the University of Georgia. And after University of Georgia, I went through my basic training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I was commissioned in the infantry as a second lieutenant. That would have been sometime in 1965 or 66, I believe.
And then did you go to law school soon after that?
Yes. I had been accepted to law school out of University of Georgia at Mercer, down in Macon. And I got a deferment to go to law school by the Army. And I transferred into the JAG Corps when I graduated from Mercer. That was in 1968. I came back here for a short time and went into the military in, I believe it was January of 1969. I entered the JAG Corps, and I had to go through additional basic training for the JAG Corps. That's the legal side of the Army. I went to University of Virginia, where I was in a 90-day program. We studied military law, the Code of Military Justice. We had some mock trials we had to go through, and pretty extensive training. And while I was there, I received my permanent orders to Fort Lee, Virginia, which was just a short distance away. We were in Charlottesville, where the University of Virginia is located, where Jefferson, Monticello, and all the history there of Jefferson and the University of Virginia. So we had to go only a few hours away to Fort Lee, Virginia, where I started my military career.
Well, there's no doubt that the fact that you'd already gone to law school had a big to-do over what you did when you were in the service, since it wouldn't have made any sense for you to not practice your profession, since you already had your law degree. And so I'm sure that led to all this. Now, is there any other places that you were in the military that you haven't briefed us on so far?
No. My service was there at Fort Lee, Virginia, and I started out in the civil practice at the university at Fort Lee. I met soldiers who were going overseas, who needed a will. The Vietnam War was full blown, and I would help soldiers and families. They would need a will, they would need a power of attorney, those kind of things, and I served in that capacity for about a year. And then I wanted to get into trial work, so I asked the colonel, Colonel Glasgow was his name, if I could transfer out of the civil side into litigation, into trial work. And so I was then made a defense lawyer, and I served in that capacity for about a year. And I started winning a few cases, and so they made me a prosecutor instead of a defense. That was the way they did it. And so then I became the chief prosecutor there for about a year or so. And then my last year, I served as chief of military justice for Fort Lee, Virginia. I was responsible for overseeing all of the legal affairs for Fort Lee and another place called Camp A.P. Hill, and basically made reports to the colonel and to the general over Fort Lee my last year and a half, and was not in the courtroom during that time. I was more in an administrative position.
How could you say that the military service that you served at this time, already being a lawyer, how did this help you a lot in your practice when you got out?
It really did. It was an immense help to me in coming from the military into the civil practice. The Code of Military Justice, the criminal side, followed the federal rules of criminal law, and when I came into the state system, I knew those rules, and they were very similar, and I had had a lot of experience in litigation, in particular in trial work. While I was in the military, I was involved in over 300 cases, and we tried. I defended a colonel, I remember one time, who was AWOL. There was a lot of unrest in the military during that time. There was a lot of fights in the barracks, a lot of turmoil, a lot of drugs, and so we were very active. There was not a week that would go by that I was not in the courtroom trying cases. Most of them were misdemeanors, but we had some serious matters too. I hope one day to write a little bit about it. I've got a box at home that I saved a little bit, a few notes on every case in anticipation that one day maybe I could write about some of that. So I hope to be able to do that in the next few years.
Well, that's interesting, and that you should mention that the unrest that was part of the times in the Army because of the Vietnam War, and there was a lot of controversy about the war. I always felt like the people that served in Vietnam and at that particular period of time were unjustly treated or looked upon because the war was unpopular. And any comments further you would like to make about that aspect?
Yes, I have high regard for the military and the people that serve in the military. And my colleagues in the military at the time, the fellow JAG officers, were very bright people. As a matter of fact, they would not accept just anybody into the JAG Corps. I was involved with some of the brightest and best lawyers, I think, around at the time. But we also observed that the draft was in effect, and we got all kind of soldiers in, and some were not upstanding people. And so we saw that in our trial work. There were a lot of AWOLs, there were a lot of misdemeanors, petty thefts, and assaults in the barracks. But overall, the American soldier is a fine person, and we had some very quality soldiers. I know coming out of North Georgia College, about 5% of my class was killed in Vietnam, some very fine people. But yes, there was a lot of unrest. The Cali trial, I was in the military while the Cali trial was going on, the My Lai incident. And as a matter of fact, I was confused because with the lawyer who was prosecuting that case was a Captain Daniel. And his name, I believe, was Aubrey Daniel. And of course, my name is Agilent Daniel. And the newspapers got us mixed up. And I remember the Washington Post called me one time to make comments about the Cali case, thinking that I was the lawyer who was involved with that case. But there was a lot of unrest, but by the same token, a lot of fine soldiers and people serving during that time.
Danny, I thank you for your remarks about this, and we want to commend you for serving your country.
Thank you.
As a part of the JAG Corps and the U.S. Army, and these were tough times, and of course we're still having tough times. But thank you for talking with us today, and we're glad you're still a citizen of our community. Would you consider yourself retired?
I am probably about 90% retired. I have become a mediator, and I'm still mediating some cases. I enjoy that, but from the general practice of law, I have stepped aside here recently, as a matter of fact. I've decided that I'm not going to accept other kinds of cases. I'm going to be involved in mediation strictly.
Well, keep your finger in the pie just a little bit, because total retirement's not what it's stacked up to be. You'll get bored. But anyway, thank you so much for this interview, and a copy of this DVD will be provided to you for your use with your family, and will be a copy in the library, and a copy in our archives, and a copy in the I guess we call it the archives downtown in the old CNS Bank building. Thank you so much, and we appreciate you being with us today, and thank you for serving your country.
Julian, thank you very much, and I appreciate what you and this committee is doing. It's a very helpful thing, and hopefully history will be able to review these interviews one day and understand a little bit where we came from.
I hope so. And
we
thank Paul for doing it, because he's so willing to do this. We do it once a week, and we hope it'll be a rewarding thing for the members that have served. Thank you so much.
Thank you.